What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the show. This is the Science Dispatch. My name is Cameron English. That is Dr. Chuck Dinnerstein, Director of Medicine at the dear old American Council on Science and Health. Chuck, it's very good to see you.
And
What's
it's nice to be seen by you, too.
I love being seen. I love seeing my friends and colleagues, so it's great. We've got a story that I want to jump right into that you wrote for us. This is from July 24th. It's called Mind the Gap, the Growing Divide Between Lifespan and Good Health. So here's your summary, and then let's talk about some of the specifics. So you write, over the last 3 decades, global advances in medicine have significantly extended human lifespan, but gains in healthy living have failed to keep pace. This imbalance has created a widening, quote, morbidity gap, where we spend over a decade in poor health. And then you conclude, will a shift in focus for healthcare systems make a difference? All right, take it away, Dr. Dinnerstein. Will that shift make a difference?
I was surprised because this article actually had a lot more traction than I anticipated. Usually I get my family and my malfunctioning bot to read my articles so I can get up to 100, 150 reads. But this one, there was a lot of people interested in it. And basically, the argument being made by Lancet is that life expectancy has, the increase in our life expectancy is outpacing our healthy years. And as a result, there is a growing gap where we wind up being ill for longer periods of time. And their question was whether this increasing gap could be addressed. So the first problem that you have to recognize is that this is a gap in high-income, very well-run medicine. And the reason for that is that we've become very, very good at taking acute and life-threatening illnesses and turn them into chronic illnesses. Breast cancer. Perfect example, where 50 years ago, having breast cancer was pretty much a death sentence, where now we routinely talk about 20-year survivors. So the better the healthcare system, the longer people stay alive, and the longer people stay alive, the longer or the greater chance they have of accruing some chronic issues. And when you begin to look at the morbidities that they were concerned about, a lot of them were just wear and tear on the body, musculoskeletal types of problems. They were not, as you would anticipate, the metabolic issues of cardiovascular disease and diabetes and obesity. But they were just more wear and tear kinds of problems. And the point that ultimately we get at is, what are we going to do about it? They would argue that more preventative care in the healthcare system would reduce some of these morbidities, but I would argue that that's really not the case, and that this morbidity gap has a lot more to do with the choices that we make in terms of our own lifestyle. What we eat, how much we exercise, how we sleep, blah, 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 blah. And we've talked about these endlessly. And that they have a greater effect on the situation than any public health measure. The one point I want to add in just before we jump into it, that I didn't mention at the time that I was thinking about the other day, is that when you look back on some of these medical problems that we've had in the past, especially COVID, where we talk about the large number of people that died in the United States compared to other countries. The large number of people that died in the United States were the frail. They were the people living in that gap, in that morbidity gap, that they were old, they had some underlying problems, and the health system had kept it together fairly well until a novel virus came along and took them out. They were the kindling.
Screwed everything up. Pesky virus.
Right. But I don't think that, as the Lancet wanted to put it, that the health gap, that this morbidity gap per se is a terrible thing.
Well, that was going to be my first question, because if I read your article right, it seems that health span is also increasing. It's just increasing more slowly than lifespan. Did I read that right? Or
That's correct. Yes.
okay, so that says to me that maybe we're overselling this a little bit in the age of MAHA. Like this is just the way you talk now. That's my suspicion. Maybe I'm too cynical. Because if life's still getting better, maybe this is just somewhat inevitable. As you point out in the story, we get old and things start going wrong. That's just the reality of being human.
Yes.
Your thoughts?
Despite the view of Silicon Valley tech bros, I don't think that there's any way out. And I think that for a system as complex as our human physiology, there is no smoking gun, one place that you can intervene that's going to change your longevity over time. And that dying is, like it or not, inevitable. And that what happens is that we slowly break down. Now, we maybe it would be better if we could concentrate that breaking down into a shorter period of time. But as one of those people in the, I hope I'm not in the morbidity gap, but it certainly is an older person, that's starting to accumulate some issues. I'm not so sure that, concentrating it all in 1 year is the best way to go. I think I have some.
So space it out a little bit. Have your bad back and your depression separated by a few years at least, right?
Right. Well, I think that you accommodate to your situation. Am I doing the same number of things that I used to do? No. I mean, we've talked about it elsewhere. It's taking care of my 18-month-old grandchild is just not a good project at my age group.
It's not a good project anywhere. It's very difficult. So don't give yourself
no.
Too much negativity.
But increasingly there are some areas where there's limitations, and you find some way to accommodate for that. So if the quality of life is still good, and that's not measured by the study at all. They just looked at administrative data, not quality of life data. Then what's the big deal?
Another point you make that I think is helpful is that there are many countries in the world that have a smaller gap between health and lifespan. But everyone, I think, would rightly recognize that their quality of life is far worse than ours. And these, of course, are the developing countries in sub-Saharan Africa and elsewhere. And just to give one example, I was watching a video the other night, just because I have a, morbid sense of curiosity, about highly venomous snakes. And they tend to, I don't know, for whatever reason, they tend to reside in poorer countries.
India.
Yeah, India is a great example. Indonesia. But in some of these countries, these snakes, they're out at night. They'll slither into your house because they're looking for food and a warm place to sleep. And if you are in the wrong spot at the wrong time, they sneak up and and you die in your sleep, right? So,
or even go, if you want to go and get treated, you need anti-venom. You need to go to a place that has it refrigerated. So now we're talking about traveling. We're talking about refrigeration. I mean, there's any number of ways that the healthcare system there fails that acute need.
Right. So in other words, that sounds horrifying to me. Like, I would rather tolerate, I'm not diabetic, thank God, but I'd rather tolerate being a type 2 diabetic who needs to chronically use insulin or whatever condition, right? I need blood thinners, whatever it is. I'd rather deal with that until I die than have some creepy looking lizard slither up and bite me and then end my life 40 years early. You know what I mean? So,
I definitely understand. But that's what I'm saying is, if you have diabetes, you learn to accommodate to it. And the American health system makes it far easier to accommodate those chronic conditions. That's why we have the gap than the other countries. And so when we talk about the failing American medical system, and it has problems. I'm never going to. That's not an argument I'm going to try and win. In a lot of ways, some of the things that they point to as problems are just a result of our successes elsewhere.
Yeah, I think it's one of those situations where we refuse to take yes for an answer, right? Like things have gotten markedly better. The breast cancer example was the one that stuck out to me in the 80s. The survival rate was like 45%, and it's doubled, you know? So for the women in our lives, that's really good news. Now that I think of it, I have a grandmother who's gotten breast cancer multiple times, and she's survived every time because they're so good at treating it, you know? So I dare say the fact that she lived long enough to meet her grandchildren probably improved her health span, right?
Right. Oh,
so I don't know. I guess it comes down to how you measure it. You can say basically anything you want, depending on what metric you're using.
Right, and I think that they're going into it looking for a headline and something to talk about, and good news does not travel well. Okay, and bad news, that we're losing the health war, especially in the U.S., is fodder for headlines and social media and everywhere else where this stuff comes out. But you really have to look a little bit deeper into what those things mean before you decide. That's why I thought it was an interesting piece. It was well researched. You can't argue with the data. As always, the points are fine. It's how you tie the points together and the story you tell that I sometimes have difficulties with.
So final point here, and I'm very curious to get your thoughts. I haven't read the paper, but you say they put the emphasis on preventative care. I'm skeptical of that for many reasons, but one of them is that these conditions affect certain demographics more than others. And in order to practice preventative medicine, you have to tell people to take better care of themselves. And I think just as a culture, we're very uncomfortable doing that, right? So if you have to single out one group and say you have more of this condition is highly influenced by the way you eat or your exercise habits, therefore you need to do more of this or less of this, that makes people in medicine very nervous, it seems. And so all that to say, I'm highly skeptical that this emphasis on prevention is going to work because, telling people to prevent certain things is just unpopular today. What do you think?
Well, I think it's very difficult to change individuals' behavior. We both can speak to that. I mean, just for our own behavior. You don't have to look beyond that to see. And unless there is some kind of internal motivator that makes you want to change for some reason, it's very difficult for external motivation, be it the doctors cajoling you, your spouse cajoling you, or getting free this or free that. That's ultimately going to alter that. And that's ultimately the problem when you talk about prevention is that you're stuck with the genes you get. That's the way it goes on that one. To a large degree, the environment that you live in, you have very little control over. The only things that you can control are your personal habits, what you eat, how you exercise, how you sleep, and the relationships that you have. And even then, people do not want to change from what's been up until that point comfortable. I understand it. I'm as much a victim of it or guilty of it as anybody else. Until I pop on that white coat and throw the stethoscope around my neck as an amulet of being a doctor and give this advice that I should be listening to.
Right. Well, and I'm sure, I don't know if they cover this, but one reinforces the other, right? Because you can manage these conditions so well, it's easier to sit on your butt and eat too many Cheetos, which I confess I have given into on occasion. So yeah, that's really good. Okay. Well, once again, the article is called Mind the Gap, The Growing Divide Between Lifespan and Good Health. That's by our own Dr. Chuck Dinnerstein. Go check that out. That's at acsh.org. While you're there, click the subscribe tab, punch in your email address. We'll send you the stories we publish. The ones you read are usually the ones we talk about. Very grateful for that. And if you enjoy our work, if you benefit from it, consider making a donation. Send us $5, $10, keep the lights on so we can pay our thoughtful experts like Chuck. And with that, we will see you next week. Thank you so much. Until then.